sure I'm pronouncing everybody's names right today. We have, is it J.M.M. Nunez?
Nuanez.
Nuanez. Oh
It's
boy.
okay. It's an extra vowel in there.
I will
It's
do
really
my
confusing.
best. Nuanez.
Yeah.
Okay. Rob Harrell.
Yep.
Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. Hi, Kim. And
You want me muted now?
Holly Horvath. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Yes, Horvath. Okay, good. All right. Look at all of our friends that are here. Doing good. Okay, we're going to officially start in about 4 minutes. If anybody wants to say anything, talk about anything, we're all ready. Anybody wants to, if you get in here early, you get to talk to the authors one-on-one. Some of you.
I'm also here. I'm Kat Patrick. Hi.
Oh, yes, Kat Patrick. Sorry, I know how. Yes, Kat Patrick. You were on a different screen. I need to go back to gallery view. That makes it a lot easier. Oh, there we go. Okay. Lots of great friends from all over our state are here today. Thank you all for being here. Nobody wants to ask early questions? Talk about when Kim was here visiting all of the schools. Did anyone host Kim while she was here?
3 years ago now.
Yes. No, no one hosted Kim. Kim, you were all over the place, weren't you? You went.
I was in Oklahoma for a whole week. So Victoria Jameson and I were both there for Encyclomedia.
Yes, we had a lot of fun. We went to an Ethiopian restaurant. I remember that.
I bet you remember that. Yeah. I don't think that was your most favorite place.
That was my first time there, and then they closed down 2 weeks later, so didn't go
Oh,
back.
really? Oh, that's too bad. I really liked it.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good.
Is that when you got really sick, Kenna?
No.
Oh, okay.
That was when I ate at your house.
Oh.
That's good. I'm glad.
Oh boy. Okay. Couple more minutes. Everybody's doing okay. For some reason my sound's really low on my computer, so I can barely hear everybody, but I'll do my very best. Maybe I'm just going, maybe I need some hearing help.
Well, I have a question for Kimberly. I have only been a library since you came to Oklahoma, so it was before that. But your book, The War That Saved My Life, was so incredible that I immediately had to get the next one. And I'm just wondering where in your story the characters came from. They were so compelling. I love the horse part. I was a horsey girl myself. So, but I was amazed by it. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciated that. It started out with just wondering, because the evacuation, is a real event in history. It really was very hard on most of the kids that went through it. I tried to flip that and say, what if it was the best thing for a particular child, and who would that be? But I really, especially for those two books, the characters got built up over time because I went through a crazy number of drafts. There were 6 major drafts for The War That Saved My Life and 9 for The War I Finally Won, even though I already would have thought I knew the characters. A really good example of the changes for The War I Finally Won is Ruth at the beginning only showed up at the very end of the story, and we kept moving her forward every time we wrote it because we liked her, and so we just kept making, and so she ended up becoming a much bigger piece of the book than I thought when I was first writing. But I'm kind of a sloppy mess. I just start and then figure things out later. But thank you.
All right, Kenna.
Here we go. This is such an exciting day. This is our second time to have a special Zoom with Penguin Young Readers. We want to thank Sheila Hennessy for making this happen. Sheila, wave to everybody, please. All the way from Chicago. Anyway, I'm Kenneth. That's Kyle next to me, if your screen has him next to me. And we are joined by 5 amazing authors. We're going to start with an author who has won the National Book Award for her book, The Canning Season. She has won the Newbery Honor Book for Everything on a Waffle, and she was a National Book Award finalist for The Trolls. She lives in British Columbia, And we are so honored to have Polly Horvath here today. Hello, Polly.
Hi,
Welcome
welcome to my dining room.
welcome to Oklahoma.
Thank you.
We have a lot of your fans here today, and we're hoping to hear more about your next book, Pine Island Home, that's coming out in less than 4 months, I believe. Can't wait to hear about that today. And also, you do have another book that was out pretty recently, Very Rich, which the paperback comes out this fall as well. So we're excited to hear about both of those books. Everybody's been making their book orders this fall, and make sure your book's on there. Polly Horvath.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do have a book coming out in September, Pine Island Home. Now, for book presentations, my favorite part is always the Q&A at the end. So I thought, since we can't do the entire 20 minutes Q&A with you all, am I still here? Yes. That what I would do is ask and answer my own questions for a bit. So what is Pine Island Home about? Thank you. What a good question. It's about the 4 McCready sisters. There's Fiona 14 and Marlon 10, 12 actually, and Natasha 10 and Charlie 8. And the 4 of them are the children of missionaries, and they're in Borneo when their parents go off to Thailand on a little mini holiday. And while they're there, a tsunami takes them away, and they're heard of no more, orphaning the 4 girls. A woman from the children's church comes, and she cares for them for a year while she tries to find a permanent home with one of their relatives in the States. And regretfully, everybody says no. And Fiona, who's the oldest, has taken on the job of keeping the family together and caring for her sisters, and she begins to panic. So she asks Mrs. Weatherspoon what's to become of them if nobody will take them on. And Mrs. Weatherspoon says, well, probably social services are probably going to foster care. And Fiona says, well, that's not so bad, right? We'll be together. And Mrs. Weatherspoon says, well, it may be very difficult to find someone to take all 4 of you. Most likely you'll be split up. And then she panics in earnest. Fortunately, the great aunt who lives on Pine Island writes the last letter, and she says, yes, of course, I'll take all 4 girls. So they fly off to British Columbia, to Pine Island. And when they get to the airport, nobody picks them up. So being resourceful girls, they take a cab to the home of their aunt in a rural community on the island. And when they get there, no aunt. There are 4 beds made up. They find a key to get in, and they spend the night there. The next day, they're told by a neighbor that their aunt has died. So they're back to square one as far as they know, and there's no grown-up waiting for them. And Fiona, at that point, realizes that nobody really knows they're on their own. And if they don't tell anybody, it's unlikely social services will find out and split them up. So that's where the book starts. Now, I'm going to go over and see if I can share this screen. It's going to be, I've got some slides. It's going to be a bit like going to your Aunt Mabel's and seeing 200 views of Poughkeepsie. Whoops, we're going to have to escape there. And hopefully this is going to work. Sorry, I'm going to go down to share screen. All right. Okay, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Probably not. There, are we good? Do you see a map? Yeah. Okay, great. So the next question, do I live someplace like Pine Island? Yes, I do. I live on Vancouver Island off the coast of British Columbia. You can see it there. Now the girls are on Pine Island, a smaller island. Our island is about the size of England, but much less densely populated. And I've got some pictures. I went madly around Metchosin, where I live in our rural seaside community, show you basically where the girls are living. They have their own beach, lots of tall pine trees. This is what I imagine their aunt's farm is like. They have their own little path down to the beach, moonlight over Metchosin, where I'm living, or Pine Island in their case. Tidal pools, so they're pretty well situated. Next question, are there any cakes in the book? Well, yes, there are. This is a rainbow cake. Mrs. Ingalls in the Little House book always says, no great loss without small gain, which is what I think we've all sort of learned during the pandemic, which is that there's terrible catastrophic situations that can happen, but gifts for all of us within there. And for Marlon, who's the second oldest, she's 12, what she discovers, because she has to cook for the family, is that she's very good at it, and she learns to love it, and she starts to make cookbooks, and she bakes as well, and she comes to love that. And one of the really magical things about writing is that you kind of take on the souls of your characters when you're writing them. When I did the canning season, I had 2 ardent gardeners in the canning season, and I personally hate gardening, and everything I plant dies immediately. I have a real brown thumb. But when I was writing it, I understood what it was for them. I could feel what it was like for them when they put their hands in the soil and their connection to the earth. And it's like you get to have a life that you wouldn't otherwise have. And I think books bring us the same gift. When you read a book, you get to have lives that you wouldn't otherwise have. And for Marlon, I really don't like cooking, and I really don't like baking, which for anybody who read Everything on a Waffle is probably a surprise, but I really hate it. But when I was doing the book, I could feel her enthusiasm for baking. And I thought how much fun a cake like that would be to make, with 7 layers, all different colors, all different flavors. So this for her was sort of a gift. For Natasha, who's the next eldest, the third oldest, her great gift was the wildlife that was on the island. Now we have wolves here, and cougars and bears. And have I ever had encounters with them? Yes, with all of them. In fact, the other day I was out in the woods with my dog, and I heard what sounded like an animal being eviscerated. And then I heard the wolf howl. And after that, I heard the wolves howling all around me, which is a wonderful thing to hear. The wolves' howls harmonize and they echo. And I felt so lucky to be in the woods and get to hear that. And at the same time, I leashed my dog and got out of there as fast as my little feet would take me, which is sort of the dichotomy of the wildlife around them, that it's wonderful and magical and at the same time extremely dangerous. Now, Fiona experiences not just her own fears when she's living there, but she's also responsible for her sisters, and her little sister, Charlie, is terrified. Her parents have died. She's been moved to the other side of the world. She's has no grown-up watching over her, and she's in the precarious situation of, if social services finding out they're living without a grown-up, of being taken away from the rest of her family. So she becomes very frightened of all of this, and Fiona becomes very frightened for her. And then the worst thing that could happen to Fiona happens when they lose Natasha. Natasha goes out into the woods, and they call her for dinner, and she never comes. And there's this sort of radio silence, and they're all looking for her. And it's sort of an echo of losing the parents, where, you know, you're calling into sort of the abyss, not knowing if you're going to see these people ever again. And has it ever happened to me? Yes, it did. That's my little family. It's my husband and myself and our 2 daughters when we were younger. The littlest one, Rebecca, I actually lost on the shores of Washington State. We were out there off season, and there was nobody for miles. And she disappeared with the surf roaring, the National Forest behind us, and a very creepy van in the parking lot. So I know the fear. That was really one of the worst moments of my life, and my legs were shaking all the way to Oregon. We did eventually get her back. I also lost my daughter's little corgi, Millie. We lost her in the woods, and you can see like a nice little mouthful for a wolf. Fortunately, after 4 hours of looking for her in the pouring rain, with neighbors and people all over coming to join us and bringing food and coffee, we finally found her, which again, I think is something we've all experienced during the pandemic, is the incredible experience of having people you don't even know helping other people that they don't know. And then I myself have gotten lost in the woods. This is a little patch of woods by us, which looks like every other patch of woods. And I went in thinking I knew exactly where I was going, and ended up absolutely miles from where I thought I was going to be. So I know what that fear is like for Natasha when she's lost in the woods. And I also know what it's like for Fiona when she's calling and there's this sort of radio silence. So everything when you're writing, something always drives the book forward. And usually you don't know what that thing is when you're writing the book, which is good because otherwise the book could be quite didactic and would be coming more from your head, I think. But when you don't know what's driving the book, in this case, Fiona's fear, you can write, I think, a truer emotional book. And in this one, when Fiona loses her parents and has to take care of her sisters, she realizes the importance of her family and how dear they are to her. And I think, again, oddly, I wrote this book 2 years before the pandemic, but it's a book that I think right now is very timely. I think everybody is really feeling very keenly right now who's close to them and how difficult it is not to be able to touch the people that you can't touch anymore, even family members, because you're quarantined. And so it's very much a book for this time, I think. Now, where did I start writing? Well, I started writing in Kalamazoo, Michigan when I was very young. And this kind of fear that Fiona has was fueling a lot of my work then too. We used to have tornadoes, and every spring when the siren went off, the whole family would go down to the basement, except for my father, who wanted to see a tornado. And he would sit out on the porch waiting for the tornado to come in so that he could see it. And I was terrified to be down in the basement. I'd run up to the porch and beg him to come down with me. And the sense I had was that I personally had to keep everybody safe. And I think Fiona has a lot of that in this book. This is Kalamazoo, Michigan, which was where I grew up and which was eventually taken out by a tornado. And my mother was a writer. So did I know any writers? Yes. She wrote picture books when I was growing up. So I knew the business end of writing very early on. I knew how to prepare a proper manuscript. I knew about advances and royalties and review journals. And I wanted to be a writer as well. I'm just going to take you off here now. There we go. I should be back. Okay. And this is the chaos of my head. I don't know if you can see back here, but there's a load of groceries here. And they're here for a reason. This is how I started writing. I would sit on our counter in the kitchen, and I would play with all the boxes and cans in the cupboard. This is when I was about 4 or 5, before I could put pen to paper. And it was the perfect training for a writer, because you've got all these different things over here. They can become different things the next day. So you've got characters and you've got the chaos in your head, which you give order to with, at first, these little physical manifestations. And later, when I was 8 years old, of course, you put pen to paper and start actually writing it down. But at the time, you're restructuring and reordering a story. And then at the end of the day, my mother would put everything back where it belonged. And you've got that neatness and tidiness again. And you come to it the next day and you start the next story and restructuring everything, which is exactly what I'm doing today. Now, I thought I would, because there's a little bit of time left, I thought I'd see if anybody had any questions.
Any
If not,
Go ahead.
I can move from there. And
I've got some questions if no one else in the room does. Anybody? Okay. Well, I'd like to ask a few. I noticed that you've taught ballet, and so ballet is very near and dear to your heart. Are some of the books in your catalog, are they, is there ballet thrown in anywhere?
no, I taught ballet because I had a father who always said, do what you love. You're going to be spending a lot of time doing whatever you do. So find something you love to do. And I knew I needed a day job if I was going to write. I had planned to be a writer all along, but I was also taking dance. So I went to school to be an Royal Academy of Dance ballet teacher. So I would have that as a day job. And I went to Toronto, which is how I ended up in Canada, to study that. And I had been writing really for forever, since the time I was 8, as I said. But when I went to high school, I continued that, and I had an agent who used to be an editor at Harper. And she was helping to send things out. Then when I got into high school, I had these two fabulous teachers, and Mr. Wooden, the German teacher, and Mr. Smith, my English teacher. And I was a very quiet kid, so I do not know why they did this for me, but they knew I wanted to be a writer. They gave me my own office in the library, posters to put over the window so it would be completely private, a typewriter, a coffee pot, a pass key to the building. And they said, we'll set things up so you can take all of your classes independent study. And I wrote in there every day. I would let myself in, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote masses of things, but I didn't sell anything. And then when I lived in New York for a while, and I went to Montreal, and I was teaching dance and I was writing, I finally got a nibble from Frost, Strauss and Giroux, and an editor there said, look, I don't think your book is ready for publication, but if you want, I'll help you rewrite it. So we spent 7 years rewriting this manuscript. In the meantime, I was teaching dance and living in this really creepy little apartment, and the paint was peeling off the kitchen, and I couldn't afford to paint it. So every time I got a rejection slip, because I kept sending the manuscript out, I would take it and I would put it over some part of the kitchen wall that needed repainting, which was vaguely comforting, because when a rejection slip would come in, instead of thinking, oh no, another rejection slip, I would say, great, I'll fit right there. And by the time I got the book, my first book published when I was 30, and mind you, I'd been writing since I was 8, I had the entire wall papered in rejection slips. And meanwhile, and then when I was 33, I quit teaching dance, and I was just writing full time.
Some of your reviews, they talk about your characters being odd and quirky, and you don't really come off odd and quirky.
Well, thank you.
So where does that come from? Where do you pull that from?
Well, I think when you meet people, I never want to meet the writers that I like, because they're never the way their books are. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. I think that I met some that I really love their works, and then you've got their writing voice in your head, and you meet the person, and the voice and the person are two completely different things, and I think that is usually quite disappointing. I remember once when I did the Miami Book Fair, it was terrible, because I went into a classroom and the teacher said, oh, we had Irma Bombeck before, and I was so disappointed, because I think she's so funny in print, and then I meet her in person, and it was so disappointing, but I know you're not going to be that way. And then I saw her afterwards, and I thought, oh, she was looking at me like, God, they're all so disappointing. So, you're right. Who's the true person? The person that you meet in person, or the writing person? I mean, who knows?
All right. Anybody else have a question? I've got one more, but I don't want to take anyone else's time if they'd like to meet Polly. Don't be shy.
Shy.
Have you been to Borneo and to the places that the McCready sisters start?
No, I haven't. I've been to a fair number of places, but not where they were in the book. And it's funny how these things come to you when you're writing. They're absolutely true, and you believe them, and you can see everything happening, and it has nothing to do with reality, and often you'll describe something in great detail, and you'll have no idea where that came from. But yeah, so I mean, of course, I've been to the British Columbia places in the book, but not to the more exotic ones, I'm afraid.
My last two questions are rapid fire. First of all, favorite award that you won, most cherished?
Oh gosh, one does not like to say. I'll tell you, they're different. I mean, the National Book Award is a much more grown-up sort of affair. And when I got that one, I remember when they called because it's one of those ones where they say, and the winner is, and then, and you're all in, your long formal dresses, and Steve Martin's hosting, and it's all very, and Oprah's there, and it's all very glam. And I remember thinking I wanted to make this very witty speech or something. And on the way up to the podium, I remember just thinking, no, just take this moment for yourself, because you've been writing your entire life. And when I was a little girl, I was very ambitious. I wanted to win all the awards and all the prizes. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and nada, nothing, zilch. And I became, very disillusioned and disenchanted and very, very bitter. And then I turned 9. And so by the time I was gotten that award, it'd been a very long haul. And I remember that was a very nice moment. I remember just thinking I was taking that moment for myself to enjoy, feeling that I'd finally, arrived, sort of. And, but the awards, they come and they go. And then the writing has got to be the real cherry, I think, though, just the writing itself, because, the day after the award, you're back to the blank page. So
I know we're just about a minute over, but I just have one more question. You've written so many books, they're so successful. Which character comes to your mind the most that you kind of miss, that just kind of pops in your head most?
That's such an interesting question. I haven't been asked that one before. I really liked the characters in the Canning season. I was very attached to them. I forget my books. When I'm done with the book, generally speaking, I don't remember the characters. I don't remember the plots. I remember absolutely nothing about them. I feel probably I'm the most like Fiona from Pine Island Home, which is the book that's coming out. That's probably she's very dear to me now, but I know next year I won't even remember her. So.
Thank you so much. Well, we are out of time, but how wonderful was that to have Polly Horvath, such a great middle grade author. And y'all, I know that you have all of her books. If you don't, you need to make sure you have them in your library catalog. And thank you, Polly, so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And I have to leave, and I'm really sorry I do. But I will watch this afterwards on YouTube and see you all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Polly. Our next author today is Rob Harrell. He's from Indiana. Not only has he written the Life of Zarf series and a new book, Wink, that just came out in March, he also has written the graphic novel Monster on the Hill, and he's a syndicated comic strip creator, and we'd love to hear about that. But Rob, we're really looking forward to meeting you and hearing about your new book, Wink. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. So I guess I'll kind of go about this similar to the way Polly did. I'm going to tell you first about Wink, about my book, and then talk a little bit about it. I'm not sure if it'll be Q&A of myself, but hopefully I'll answer some of your questions. So Wink is a book about Ross Malloy. This is him here, and he's about to start 7th grade, and he's just your typical kid. Although he really likes blending in. He likes sort of fading into the background, and is looking forward to his 7th grade year being a great one, but with no drama, and he can just disappear. And then right at the end of the summer, he gets diagnosed, unfortunately, with a rare eye cancer. And so, now he's going back to school, and in addition to being, in addition to all the normal problems that you have in 7th grade, all the horrors of middle school, he now has to deal with being, labeled as the cancer kid or the sick kid. And he starts losing some hair. He starts losing some eyesight because of his treatments. He has to wear this dumb looking hat everywhere he goes, including when he's indoors, to keep light off of his face. And the goopy stuff he has to put on his eye. So pretty much at this point, blending in is completely off the table. It's not an option for Ross. And in addition to that, he has one of his good friends just sort of vanishes on him, just kind of stops hanging around him, which he doesn't understand. He has another friend who may be moving. And then there are some kids who do some mean things online, some memes actually. And so I know that it sounds like a lot of bad stuff, and it is. It's a lot of bad, heavy stuff for Ross to go through. And while the book has some real emotions and it has some really, emotional parts, my challenge to myself was I wanted to make it a really fun book and a funny book. I come from comic strips and graphic novels, and books with a lot of humor in them, and I that was part of my challenge, was to make it something that kids would want to read. I also, part of the reason that works in the book is because the humor all comes through Ross's voice. It's told in first person, and you get to see Ross's kind of quirky look at life and all these horrible things that he's going through, as well as the funny ones. And then he gets in some really funny, awkward, weird situations, and you see it all through Ross. He likes to draw, so there's some drawings in there. There's some comics in there. So I should tell you now that the book is based on the cancer treatments that I went through about 15 years ago. So I was an adult at the time. I was 36 when I got diagnosed. And it was the 25th reported case of this weird eye tumor in my lacrimal gland. So I ended up having to go through 8 weeks of radiation treatment. I ended up losing the sight in my right eye. Lost an eyebrow. I don't know if you could tell, this one. And anyway, so I knew I wanted to write this book, but I felt kind of bad, frankly, just dumping all of this on the shoulders of this fictional 7th grade kid, Ross. So the one thing that I wanted to make sure was that I gave him as many tools as I had to help cope with it. And, we talk again about, we're going through such a weird time right now. And, there are all kinds of things that kids have to cope with. So I think that's one of the main things I was trying to drive in my book was how you can get through a really horrible situation. So some of the tools that I gave him, the first was humor and art. And I kind of lumped those together, partially because I drew comics all growing up and still do comic strips. So when I was going through my cancer, I was doing my comic strip at the time was one called Big Top. And it was about a kid growing up in the circus, and he had this sarcastic poodle and a neurotic bear and a clown that was more like an animal than anyway. So while I was going through my treatments for those 8 weeks and during the surgeries, I continued to do my strip. And it became really important to me. And I saw how much being able to put myself in a different headspace and try to think of something funny every day, it really helped me get through it. And looking back on it while I was writing the book, I think even more so than I realized. So Ross starts drawing. He has comics like I had Big Top. Ross draws Bat Pig. I'm not good at the screen sharing, so I'm going to do it the low tech way. So this is Bat Pig, and he draws these comics, and you can kind of see how he works through what he's going through. He actually started out drawing Bat Butt was the name of the character, and he got in trouble for drawing Bat Butt, got sent to the principal's office. So he decided it's safer to stick with Bat Pig. But here's an example of a Bat Pig comic, and this is Bat Pig versus the Hat. And right here, the Hat is throwing shade around town, and Bat Pig has to figure out how to deal with him. And part of the reason I told you that he had to wear this dumb looking hat, let me grab this. So this is the hat. And Ross is told by his doctor, like I was told by my doctor, you have to wear this anytime you're awake and sitting up, indoors, outdoors, in class, whatever. And so, as an adult, it was tough. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time, so I didn't stick out that much, but I still felt kind of dumb wearing this. And I thought if you were in 7th grade, that would be more on the level of a tragedy to wear this thing. This isn't actually the hat. The hat that I had fell apart because I wore it for so long. But when I saw that in a store, I was like, oh, I need one to remind me. So the second tool that I gave to Ross was music. He has this very cool radiation tech named Frank, and Frank is in a band, a horrible band called Ripe Sponge is the name of the band. And he starts introducing Ross to different kinds of music, like different music than what Ross's parents listened to, including some punk and some harder music. And it sort of fits Ross's mood, and he starts finding this love of music. And then eventually he asks Frank to teach him guitar. And so that's a big push in the book. You get to see how Ross just pours himself into playing guitar and learning and practicing for hours and hours and hours. And, his fingers bleed and he gets very into it. And then the third thing, the third tool that I made sure I gave him was just a real support system. He has this best friend, Abby, who's very sort of eccentric, and she likes to stand out. She likes to be the life of the party, so to speak. And everybody should have a friend like Abby. She can joke around with Ross, even about his cancer, in a way that it was really refreshing to me, the few friends I had who I could actually go to that kind of gallows humor with. He also has his dad and his stepmom, Linda, and they're very supportive. I liked that he has supportive, kind, intelligent adults in his life in this book. And then Frank is one of the adults who can talk to Ross like he's an adult as well. And that was important to me. I had a radiation tech who I talked with music all the time. So Frank is part of that, and part of this manager that I had when I used to lifeguard. I kind of combined them into Frank. And then he starts making new friends throughout the book. There's a character named Jimmy who starts out as a real bad guy, and I won't tell you too much, but Russ starts to figure out that there's a little bit more to him than he thought there was. So as far as questions, the main question I get asked is, why would you write this book? Why would you try to write a funny book about cancer? Why would you want to write about your cancer experience anyway? It was bad enough going through it. And there's a few answers to that. So when I had my cancer, I was living in Austin, and somebody gave me Lance Armstrong's book about his cancer experience called, I think it's Not About the Bike. And it's a really well-written book. It's a great book, very inspirational. But I will say this, for me, I had a very weird reaction to it. It actually made me feel kind of worse when I was in the middle of, I would get these horrible black eyes and lose hair and all this, and I was tired. And Lance Armstrong goes at his cancer like a superhuman, like a super athlete. He does everything but stand on the top of his house and scream, "I'm gonna defeat you, cancer!" And I just wanted to lay on the couch and watch Everybody Loves Raymond or bad sitcoms, or lay under a blanket or stare at the ceiling. And I thought, what if I'm not a superhuman? What if I'm just a guy who's barely scraping by through this? Am I going to be okay? So it made me feel worse. And what I wanted to do was write a book that would show warts and all. It shows the angry parts and the sad parts and also the funny and weird parts that happen. Because one thing I figured out is that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how dire the circumstances are, your sense of humor doesn't just shut off. If the doctor comes in and gives you bad news and then gets up to walk out of the room and they have a milk dud stuck to their butt, it's still going to be funny. And your brain is still going to register as that, like, oh my gosh, he has that. So I wanted to get into that, partially because I think that's a way to get you through things. The other question is why for middle grade if you were an adult when you went through it? And I had thought about all different ways to tell this story. My personal story, there were some crazy things. They were going to remove my part of my face, and I was told I'd be blind after the surgery. And then through just sheer luck, my dad found someone in Bloomington, Indiana, where I grew up, that could treat me. So I wanted to tell this story, but I wasn't sure how. I wasn't sure the best way. And then my best friend's daughter, unfortunately, got diagnosed with cancer as well. And she and I talked a lot. We had a lot of long talks about it. And it was like we were both in this new club that nobody wants to be a part of. And so we could talk candidly about all the weird things that go through your mind. And then I saw how hard it was for her in school. And she had friends who peeled away and just couldn't handle it. So they just didn't handle it. They just vanished. And she had some mean things said about her. And she really struggled with the social aspect of it at school. So I had just gotten done writing my Life of Zarf books. And I thought this might be the way that I could write this book and have it have the most impact, and also make it fun. And I really enjoy writing for that age group. It's just such a crazy, weird, fun time, middle school, that I thought this is the way to do it. So that's basically what I had to say. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I'll open up to the room before I ask mine. Anybody have a question for Rob?
I do.
Yes.
How long did you have to wear the hat?
I had to wear the hat for about a year.
Oh.
I probably should have worn it a little bit longer than that, but for about a year I wore it. And then I lost the hair, sort of this whole big chunk here. And so I actually, in some ways, was glad for the hat. And I grew my hair long during that time. It was terrible. I look like I don't know what I look like. I see back then, and it's just not good. But yeah, so the hat was a blessing and a curse.
Okay. A year, that's a long time though.
Yeah, and yeah, especially wearing it indoors. That was
Yeah.
tough. Like going to a restaurant or something, you just feel stupid, and it's like you want to wear a sign that explains to everybody. And so actually Ross ends up writing on his doctor's orders on the hat, which I didn't do, but I kind of wish I had. When I thought of that for the book, I was like, that's what I should have done. That would have, that would have cured that.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Rob, where in Indiana are you living?
I'm in Zionsville, so I'm just on the north side of Indianapolis.
I used to work at Marion Merrill Dow and Dow Lanco back in the day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why, and my parents live in Fort Wayne. That's why I asked. Thanks.
Okay. Well, and I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. And then I lived in Broad Ripple for years. And then my wife and I went down to Austin, Texas for about 12 years. And we've just been back for a while now.
I have a question. I have a daughter in Austin and the music scene there. I was wondering if there's any overlap between the music of Austin and Ross's character.
Oh, there definitely is, I think. I mean, to be honest, that's part of why my wife and I, we don't have kids, and I have some relatives down in Austin. And so we just moved down there sort of on a, hey, let's challenge ourselves and go do something new. And, but part of it was because we were so into the whole live music thing. And so we went and saw music all the time down there. And, you know, it changed my musical taste in ways. And you know, there's musicians everywhere. You can't help but have a neighbor who's a musician in Austin. So, you know, it all rubbed off on me, and I know that paid off in here. And I did sort of get into this while I was going through the treatments. I got sort of into punk music, and so it was important to me to put that in there. And there's quite a bit of punk going on in Austin. You think of it as being country or singer-songwriter mostly, but there's all different kinds of music there.
I was a guitarist from 9th grade on when somebody taught me how to play jet plane in the art room. And so I love the whole thing, and the variety in Austin. I can see that being an appeal. Thank you for putting that into the book too, because I can see how that would be a tool.
Yeah. And you know, guitar is one of those things that I think you almost have to get obsessed with it to get good at it. And so that feeds into, you know, having an outlet for sure.
Rob, Kyle and I hear so many authors, you know, when they come to Oklahoma, we listen to their presentations and they talk about having their main character and putting them through the ringer. Mm-hmm. Obviously, your main character, which reflects your life as well, Ross, he went through the ringer too. And you talked about giving him tools, but I didn't hear, the tools. Where did your tools come from? You know, you were giving him some of the tools you had. If you've already said that, I apologize, but do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
No, that's fine. You know, music was a huge one for me, and I can play guitar a little bit. I can play some chords, that kind of thing. And I did play guitar during that time. I also was doing my comic strip. And so I think that was a huge part. You know, I still had to sit down and write 7 strips a week, and then go in and draw them and send them off on my computer. And then the other thing that I couldn't give Ross, because he's in 7th grade, is my wife was just amazing. She was my biggest supporter, and And so I think Abby, his best friend in the book, Abby has a little bit of my wife in her, and I just, yeah, and then also just that support system. And like I said, I did get to know the radiation techs really well, and they could not have been more helpful. And I know they were probably just being professional, but it was, it felt like we developed this real friendship over the time, and I've stayed in touch with some of them. And so, you know, those were my tools, was sort of my family, friends, music. I had burned out my iPod. I just, you know, especially after my surgery, I had about 2 weeks where I had to just kind of lay in bed. And I had a mix for every mood. So if I got really angry about something, I could put on my angry mix, and put on my sad mix, or put on my chilling out mix. So those are definitely some of the same tools.
I've got one more question. Does anyone want to go first? All right, Rob. People describe this book as having sardonic humor, which I guess is kind of mocking and stuff. And you were talking about humor and how you know, have certain friends that you can talk certain ways. I know what you're talking about. I've got certain friends I gravitate to. We got to talk that way for us, for it to work. But looking back through your catalog, is there sardonic humor through your comic strips, your other books, the Zarf books? What can you tell us about the humor that we'd find in those?
You know, sardonic is one of those words that I probably need to go look up from time to time, because I forget. I've heard myself described that way before. So yes, I think sardonic. But I mean, there's definitely like some sarcastic, some kind of, you know, I had my favorite character in the comic strip Big Top was this snarky little trained poodle, and he wasn't even in the strip at the beginning, and then he showed up and became kind of the star. And I loved the fact that I'm a fairly shy guy, or I don't know about shy, but just I follow the rules. I don't say things. You know, this poodle, I could say whatever I wanted through that poodle, and that was kind of magical. And then I think I do find that I really enjoy writing the characters that you love to hate. That's kind of fun to do. Like in Life of Zarf, there was this prince who's just a jerk. I mean, he's just a jerk every time you turn around, and man, was he fun to write, because you could just say the most awful things. Again, I'm maybe slipping away from the definition, but and Monster on the Hill, that again was it set out to be sort of a thinly veiled book about depression. Now it's coming out as a movie this next year. And I will say it is nothing like the book, and it is not about that at all. So the sense of humor is going to be completely different. I think that's kind of, I guess, my thing is the humor.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to encourage everybody to make sure you get Monster on the Hill. The expanded edition is coming out. It's a new release. It must have some extra things in it. Make sure you get that. It's a great graphic novel. You've done it all: graphic novels, comic strips, and now you have a middle grade novel. And you know, make sure you have the Life of Zarf series in your catalog, Monster the Hill, Wink, and everything like that. Rob, this was a lot of fun. Rob Harrell, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Our next author has just had her debut novel come out. It's entitled Birdie and Me, and J.M.M. Nuanez. Is that right? Did I do it?
Yep. Got all the vowels.
You might be able to also call her Jess. Anyway, she has born and raised in California, and I think she still lives there. And there's
For
her
now.
information right there. And you know, again, for this happens a lot. You know, you see these first novels come out and they're just big hits. They have, you know, multiple starred reviews and everything like this. This book was described as it covers identity and grief and hope, and it's very tender, and we can't wait to hear about it. J.M.M. Nuanez, thank you for being here today.
Yay, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is so much fun, especially since I'm like super newbie. So it's mostly, I'm just like listening to everybody, kind of like probably the most excited out of everyone. Yeah, so yep, this is, let me see if I can, yep. except it's backwards. But this is my book. It came out at the end of February, so I squeaked just in under before a lot of the lockdowns started happening, and I actually kind of did a self-imposed lockdown. It was almost 3 weeks before all of the other ones started, because I take care of my 92-year-old grandmother, and so our family kind of went into hiding before, just to keep her safe. So this has been a very strange experience. Wasn't planning on having my book come out like this, but it's also been very interesting, especially reflecting on kind of what the book is about, which is like when you get stuck with family that you don't really know or understand. And I think I've often gone back to, during this time, thinking of all the kids and just everyone in general who are at home with people that maybe they haven't had the best relationship with, and that now it's been very hard to like physically escape or even take a break from. So Birdie and Me is about Jack and her younger brother Birdie, and their mother passes away, and they go to live with first one Uncle Carl, and then several months later, when that doesn't work out, they go to live with another uncle, Patrick. And they go from living in a fairly big town to a very small town. And a lot of the book is kind of kicked off when there's conflict around what Birdie wears, because he's gender non-conforming kid, basically. The book really isn't about that, and I don't even use that language in the book, mostly because Birdie is just who he is, and he just likes what he likes. But he is definitely maybe not necessarily your typical kid of what you would see. I think a lot of this is actually Jack's story about being an older sibling and what that means. I was really listening intently to a lot of what Polly had to say about her main character, Fiona, being sort of a caregiver. And I used to teach, and a lot of my students, I noticed when I got to know them, even kids that are in middle school, a lot of them were acting as caregivers at home with people not realizing. And this is very interesting to me because a lot of it is like, I think a lot of kids do this. I did this to a certain extent. I'm the oldest of 5. And my youngest sibling is 16 years younger than I am. And I think I had a very good childhood, and I don't ever feel like I was abused or anything like that, or that it was a very bad situation. But I definitely took on my share of responsibility. And I know that there are lots of kids that end up in that situation with a lot of caregiving responsibilities that maybe weren't intended originally. And so the book is a lot about that, and processing, having to deal with all that, and processing grief from from things that have happened in the past. I actually thought I would just, since this is my only book that's out, I would actually read just like a little bit take a few minutes and read. And I'm actually going to read from chapter 3, because you can find the first couple of chapters like on like as a sample or whatever online. And chapter 3 is actually when Jack, the main character, she goes to hang out with her best friend, or the best friend that she can have in this new town. And that friend is named Janet, and she's one of my favorite characters in the book. So this starts with chapter 3. It's called The Tornado. To say that Janet Wasweiler is my best friend is a little bit of a lie. I guess it's better to say that she is my only friend. She was the first person I met after Patrick drove Bertie and me to California for Mama's. Janet lives with her mom in a house that's really a double wide trailer on a 2-acre plot of land. It sounds bad, but it's actually pretty nice. There's a big oak tree and 6 big cedars, and the first time I saw it, my chest ached thinking of home. Janet has her own room, and her mom has 2 jobs and like 4 boyfriends, so she's barely there, which means Janet basically has the place to herself. I've walked to Janet's from town probably 20 times and never knew Patrick, who's one of their uncles, lived right down the street. Bertie and me would even explore the nearby nature reserve, which stretches almost to Patrick's backyard, and still we never knew. This morning, Sunday, Patrick and Duke left before the sun was up. Bertie was still in his room when I slipped a note under his door reminding him I was going to Janet's. My tennis shoes make little crunching noises as I cross the driveway to her trailer door. I'm starting to doubt if she's awake, even though she made me promise to come by at 9 a.m. Hey, loser, don't you have anything better to do on a Sunday morning? Janet yells through a window. Ha, you're the one who told me to come early, I yell back. God, your hair is a disaster. I should take a before photo. Get in here. Lucky, a dog Janet found behind the stop and go barely lifts her head from a nap. I hope they're not waiting for her to become a watchdog. I walk in, looking around. She's not here, says Janet. It's Sunday morning, meaning last night was Saturday night, which is Ross's night, so she's probably at his place, as if I care. You want some Fruit Loops and a smoke? My mom forgot her cigarettes again. I sit down to her bowl of cereal, ignoring the cigarettes as she begins brushing my hair. Janet is 14, a year and a half older than me, but she started smoking when she was 10. Now she says I'm already behind on my smoking career by more than 2 years. But I don't know if I totally believe her, because I've never seen her once actually finish a cigarette. Janet sighs. I can't believe you go outside looking like this. Seriously, why am I even friends with you? Because I helped you get your cell phone out of your mom's locked car, and because I sometimes do your English homework. Okay, whatever. Now tell me, what is Patrick's house like? I can't believe you live there now. I've always wondered what it's like inside. And what's with that giant round thing in the front yard? I don't know. I think it's a shed. I swirl the cereal bowl. Bertie says it's an old grain silo. Oh my God, Bertie! Is Patrick actually babysitting him? No. I tell her about the note I found this morning that said Patrick had a quick job in town and would be back later. So Bertie's all alone doing what? He could have come with you, you know. The kid knows more about hair than you do. He's sleeping. That's not really true. I heard him moving around in his room, but Bertie's not a big fan of Janet. He calls her an acquired taste, like sushi. I have no idea where he gets these phrases. Janet goes to her room to find a spray bottle and her little stand-up mirror, and when she returns, she stops in the doorway and does that thing where she pops her hip out and then scowls. Okay, spill it. What? She walks over and sets the mirror in front of me and then starts in on my hair again. Is it that bad? Patrick's house? I shrug. I mean, it's just such a big house compared to Uncle Carl's apartment. Yeah, but don't you, have your own room? It's got to be better than sleeping on a futon next to some grungy couch. I shrug again. Oh, don't go all broody on me. It's too early for broodiness. This is one fine day, Jack Royland. Do you know what day it is? And then Janet goes on to talk a lot about her hopes to work at the salon in town, which is why she's experimenting on Jack's hair. And so you can kind of see that Jack initially kind of gets swept up with all these people that are just around her, dealing with their own sort of complicated lives. And the big thing that why I love to write, or maybe the reason why I do, is just because I'm obsessed with knowing how everyone else lives. And so all of these characters that are in the book, and all of the books that I write become extremely real to me. And one of the main reasons how that happens is usually people ask, that a lot of the characters seem very real, like they have this whole backstory. And that always makes me really happy, because they do. In my mind, I can tell you all about the struggles that every single character and their likes and their loves and their past lives. I can tell you a lot about them. And and I'm going to see if I can try to lift this up. This is usually, I got to luckily do just a few school visits before everything shut down. And that one of the biggest things that I miss is I'm much better at in person. I really like walking up to somebody and walking up to the students and walking into the rows of students and commenting on their clothing or whatever, and kind of mixing with them. And so this definitely has been really hard because the Zoom screen is like, you get this little square of a person and that's about it, but one of the things I like to drag around is this. Let's see if I can lift it up, which is about a third of the rough drafts for this book. It went through 18 major revisions. So I'm not very efficient at writing, but it allowed me to kind of really get to know my characters. And the thing that I love talking to students about is that to really focus on whatever the thing is that you like, to focus on tenacity, to keep going, whatever it is, whatever you're creating, whatever your thing is. And that tenacity is so much more important than talent, because everybody has lots of talent in lots of different areas. But the difference is that that's some people for whatever reason don't keep going. And students usually get a kick out of that. Along with, I usually like to mess with them because I wear my cheeseburger shoes, which I don't know if you can see on here. And so I usually try to walk around and try to find another kid that's wearing like the craziest shoes, which also goes back to my book because Birdie he dresses really uniquely. He's way more colorful than I am. I tend to be not nearly as rainbow or as sparkly as he is. But I really like cheeseburgers. Even if they're made with an Impossible Burger and vegan cheese, I'll eat any kind of burger. And so I like to wear cheeseburger shoes. And kids get a kick out of that. But that's like my true my true self. And yes, I don't normally wear shoes when I'm Zooming, but when I'm out and talking to kids, I like to present my true self, just as this is like, even though it's a novel, right? So it's fiction, but it's still like true, I guess, totally authentic and true, which is why I love stories so much. So yeah, I think that's it. A little bit about me, which isn't too much because I just started. So I'm new here, but anyway, so thank you. And one of the heroes of my book is a librarian. So yes, I love librarians. I grew up in a library with my stepmom is a library manager and has been for 30 years now. So libraries are, gosh, I need this lockdown to end because I'm going into withdrawals without them. So yes, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Well, we're not, we still have a few minutes left with you. So
Okay.
does anyone have a question for Jess or about her book, Birdie and Me?
I have to say, I can't wait to read this book. Thank you for writing it. I'm so excited after hearing that. And I'm just curious, what are your favorite cheeseburger toppings, since you have cheeseburger shoes and everything? That's actually what we're having for dinner tonight.
Oh, nice. I will eat anything on a burger, man. But mushrooms, fried egg, bacon. I will eat a burger anyway. The best burger is someone that somebody makes me, somebody else. I do a ton of cooking in the house. My husband doesn't do any cooking, but he does all the dishes, which is that's a great trade for me. But so usually if somebody else is cooking for me, I'm like, this is the best burger I've ever eaten because I just showed up and ate it. So, but yeah, I will eat anything. Grilled onions. Oh man, but I have to stop because I'm getting hungry. So yeah, thank you though.
I saw a cheeseburger phone in a movie recently. Have you, do you have one of those?
No, I don't, but any kind of, I do have a cheeseburger pin, and I have a taco pin. I occasionally wear pins. I think, but this one's a cat today. I'm a big cat person. Yeah, and I have like other. I eat all types of food, but yeah. And there's a ton of things in here about the kids really are super into pizza. And pizza kind of becomes, because this is the thing that they ate before their life kind of tipped upside down. And their kind of unreachable uncle Patrick, he starts trying to get to these kids. He has no idea how to talk to them, and so he starts buying pizza, even though there really isn't a good pizza in this tiny town where they live. So he like drives into the next town to get pizza for them, and it becomes, so this, you know, food kind of becomes this thing that it's like this thing that you place in between two people, right, to begin a connection. So yes,
We
now
have
I
a
really am hungry.
We have a couple more minutes. I just wanted to real quick, if one of our students falls in love with your first book, what can we tell them to expect in book number 2? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going really well. It's another book that has a lot of food in it. I'm also a really big fan of Chinese dumplings. Actually, any dumpling from anywhere I will eat. And so it surrounds like a couple kids who their friendship becomes strained when one moves away and kind of disappears, but then comes back, and they're trying to figure out how to become friends again when stuff has happened to both of them in a couple of years. And one of the things that they kind of revolve around is dumplings and also skateboarding. But my main character is a girl, and so yeah, it's also, there's like girl skateboarding in it too, which is becoming more common. It actually is very common. There's a lot of girl, even pro female skateboarders, but sometimes you don't always hear about them. So yeah, so but still more food to come.
Some big names have written nice comments about your book and put their names on it. Just real quick, as a first-time author, have you come across any big names? Are there any big name authors in your phone, or that have mentored you and you've had contact with that was fun and memorable?
Yeah, I mean, man, actually, when my editor was sending me some of the reviews, I was really shocked. I hadn't had much contact with very many authors before the book really came out. I mean, here and there, like online. I kind of struggle a little bit with online communication. I'm a much more like in person, which is why I'm like leaning closer and closer to the camera, because I'm just like trying to jump in. And I don't know why, because I feel like my generation is typically very comfortable, but I'm really tough with Twitter and stuff. It's really, really tough for me. So, but I have had communication with some of the people that said really nice things. I mean, all of them, I was just still like, I'm flabbergasted. But definitely like Leslie Connor, who wrote a ton of books. Actually, she just came out with a new book as well. But the Truth as Told by Mason Buttle, which is it's a phenomenal book. I couldn't believe it that she would say nice things about my book. I think I did follow her, actually, now that I remember. And so it's just incredible. And even like I said, this experience sitting on here, I'm more just like listening to what everybody's saying and trying to like really soak it in and just let it get into my bones. So yeah, I'm amazed, and I try to learn from all of them, from everybody, as much as I can. So that way I can just keep writing the best books I can write.
Great.
Well, in
We're
case
looking
you missed I was just going to say, in case you missed it in the chat, Kimberly Brubaker Bradley is very excited to meet you because she's pleased to meet you. What does she say? She says, "I'm very pleased to meet an author who writes more drafts than me." So
I know, that's why when she said like 6 or 9, I was like, whoa, dang, if I could just get to 6 or 9, maybe someday, maybe in like 30 years when I become better at it. But oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Had so much fun with you. Everybody needs to make sure that they have Birdie and me in their first order this fall and look for more stuff by Jess or JMM Nuanez.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
it was very excited to meet you today and get everybody to put you on their radar. And congratulations on your first novel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks.
All right, moving right along. We're only 5 minutes behind. That's pretty good. We are now pleased to introduce Kat Patrick. She's from Seattle, and she's been writing for a while. Her first novel, Forgotten, has actually been sold in over 20, I think 23 countries. But this book that she's coming out with this month, Tornado Brain, is her first venture into true middle grade with a 7th grade protagonist who has experiences neurodivergency, and we can't wait to hear about that because we love books like this because it builds so much other kids being aware and being learning how to be kinder to them and help them with friendship. All right, Kat Patrick, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I was just settled back into my chair and enjoying listening to everyone else, and now I think I forgot how to talk, so I'll just take a drink of water. Okay. So I'm the nerd who put together a PowerPoint, which I'll walk through that really quickly. It's only like, I think, 6 slides, and then take any questions that people have. But I'm a mom of middle schoolers myself, and they say that you get baby brain when they're first born, and I still have baby brain, so I need to have some talking points as I walk through this. Can you see my screen? Or not yet? Let's see. Let's see now. Can you see it now?
After you push share screen, I think you have to choose which one you want to put up there.
Let's see. There we go. There it is.
There you go.
All right. So let me see if I can just go through this thing. Okay, so like I said, I'm a mom of twins and a little calico kitten who may jump up and try and eat that plant at some point. I hope not. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I am, like everyone that we've heard from today, a lifelong writer. I think I wrote my first book when I was in 2nd grade and just kind of always aspired to be a published author. I published my first book in 2011, and I started out in the young adult universe with my first 4 books. Those were Forgotten, Revived, The Originals, and Just Like Fate, which I co-wrote with a friend, Suzanne Young. And then I took a little bit of time and am coming out now with my first middle grade book. Also, I threw in there, my pandemic pastime is watching all of the Marvel movies in order, in chronological order. So that's how I'm spending my days other than writing. So what's Tornado Brain about? Tornado Brain is about a girl named Frankie, who is a neurodivergent 13-year-old girl. She's also a twin, and life is a little bit more challenging for her than for her twin sister. But she gets by okay, and she's doing all right, except then her former best friend goes missing. And Frankie is convinced that she's the only one that's seeing the clues that her former best friend Colette has left behind. And so she kind of ropes her twin sister into helping her, and she sets out to figure out what happened to Colette before it's too late. So, I mean, everybody uses this term neurodivergent. It can mean a lot of different things. In Frankie's case, it means autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit disorder, and sensory processing disorder. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about neurodivergent with Frankie. So Tornado Brain is really 4 things. I mean, it's very much a coming of age story, and it's about love and, you know, love between friends, and also the development of this sister relationship throughout the book. And It's definitely a mystery. I've realized that every single book I've ever written has a mystery element to it. I guess that's just my thing. So it's definitely a mystery. And then it's also about just courage and resilience during tough times, which I think everyone can relate to right now during this pandemic. As far as the inspiration, I am, like I said, a mom of twins, but they are also, one of them is neurotypical and one of them is neurodivergent. So this is definitely something that's near and dear to my heart. I really feel like I'm a person who does better when I write what I know. So relative to this book, the 3 things that I know really well, I know what it's like to live in the Pacific Northwest. I know what it's like to be a mom of twins. And I also really know what it's like to live in the orbit of a child like Frankie. This, I just threw in a few pictures. I was really inspired by the setting of Long Beach, Washington for this book. That's where it's set. And it's this tiny little town on the, in the southwest corner of Washington, almost to Oregon. And we love to go there. My family and I love to go there as often as we can because it's really like where we live our best lives. But this is where Frankie was born. And this town to me just screams Frankie. It's not very gentrified. It's kind of a little disheveled, if you will, but it has so much heart, and that is Frankie. And it also has kind of crazy weather. I mean, it gets really windy and it gets really stormy. And I love that parts of the book, sort of the setting mirrors Frankie's big emotions. So it's very near and dear to my heart. Let me just stop this share really fast and put my face back on there. So, so that gives you a little overview about the book and about me, and I would love to take any questions if anybody has them.
I have a question. I
Okay.
have makeup on, so I am not on video.
That's okay.
I'm kind of enjoying this, you know, being at home and not having to get ready every day.
Yeah. Well, I thought it would be weird if I didn't share mine, so I just put on my makeup for this.
Well, I went to school and checked in books all day today, and so anyways, you know.
Yeah.
Did you take the photos that you just showed?
I did, yeah.
They are beautiful.
Thank you.
Very pretty place to visit.
Yeah, I love it there.
How far is that from your home?
It takes about 4 hours to get there. Seattle's surprisingly not that close to the Pacific Ocean. I didn't really realize that until I moved up here, how far away it was from the Pacific Ocean. It's a haul.
I am very interested in your book. I was a special ed teacher before I became a librarian for 11 years. And that whole dynamic kind of runs in my family as well.
Yeah.
So I completely get it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, twins are funny anyway, because they're kind of like the ultimate science experiment. You give them both the same thing and see how they react. And it's always night and day from each other, in my house at least. But then, yeah, adding the layer of the neurodiversity on top, it can be challenging, and it can be challenging, of course, for the person who's experiencing it firsthand, but also for the other child who often has to give a lot up because, you know, in the face of some sort of big emotions from the other one.
Totally understandable. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions before I start my line of questioning?
I
No.
had one actually.
Sure.
You just like briefly touched on it about like in your story's case, the twin that isn't neurodivergent, and how much is I can't remember if you mentioned if the twin is a he or a she, but like how much does that twin play in the book? And it just made me think, because in my book, often, even though Jack is telling the story, she sometimes gets overshadowed by Birdie, who is kind of very unique between, you know, the two of them when you just meet them. And so I'm always like kind of hyper thinking of that, of like, you know, the kids or siblings that, you know, kind of by necessity have to kind of take a back seat in a lot of ways. Is that twin in the book a lot?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely, so they're twin girls, and it's definitely Frankie's story for sure. And she tells the story through her own eyes, which I think it's a perspective that a lot of kids who are in the same boat as Frankie will relate to, and people who are neurotypical may have some eye-opening moments a little bit. But so she tells the story of her interaction with her sister. I can share that the next book that's coming out is a sister story. So it doesn't have a name or anything yet, but it features the sister as the main character, and so you get to know her, you know, firsthand in the next book. But yeah, it's always interesting. It's always kind of, you got to get into the head of that one character who's the main character, and write about her experiences with her sister, not necessarily how everyone else in the world sees her sister or how her sister might see herself. So it's an interesting balance.
Okay, so you once were quoted as saying that you had a love of High School Strange, and that reflected in your young adult novels. And that comes a little bit from Fahrenheit 451, that you were also quoted as saying that was a special book to you. So in this new book, now that you've had some time off and now you're back and now it's middle grade, is there some middle school strange in this one?
Well, no, I mean, as there's strange in that real life is pretty strange. I think, you know, middle school is pretty strange. It's a lot about the dynamics of making and keeping friends in middle school, and that can be pretty darn strange. I remember that vividly, and I think that's challenging for middle schoolers for sure. It's also challenging for adults. I mean, you know, and especially if you throw in the neurodiversity on top of that, where it's someone who may not like react to social cues the same way as other kids. And so I think all that stuff, Frankie feels strange, but no, she doesn't have any special abilities or anything like my other books.
Now, again, back to your young adult books, there's high school librarians in this room. If they happen to discover that they have some Cat Patrick books on their shelf, what kind of kids should they be looking for to put those in the hands? You know, what kind of kids really, or I say young adults, would gravitate to those?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think so. Even though I started out in YA, my books were always kind of on the younger end of the YA spectrum. So they were pretty much usually 12 and up, and this is 10 and up. So, you know, it's not too different. I think that kids who like the books that are about really diving in and trying to get to know someone, I think that it's sort of in the world of the like thing about jellyfish and counting by sevens and those kind of books. I'm not a series writer, so it's not necessarily great for the fantasy series kind of kid. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten over the years since I've been published emails that just say, when does the sequel come out? Are you writing a sequel? I need to know the end. And especially because a few of my books kind of left things a little bit cliffhangery, which I like, because I like to challenge kids to use their imaginations and think, okay, what do I think the ending was? This one has a clear what? Oh, sorry. This one has a clear-cut ending, and so I hope that it will be a satisfying read, although I really already got an email when, are you writing another book from Frankie's perspective? which just is very flattering and tells me that people enjoyed reading about Frankie.
And I hope I didn't miss this along the way. Do you love this level, this middle grade? Are you do you see yourself just proceeding here and staying here for a while, or you think about going?
Yeah. I think, well, so my next book will be middle grade, and I think it does feel right to me right now. It's a place that I'm enjoying being. I don't want to say that I'll never go back to YA, and I have lots of other ideas too. I think every author probably has kind of too much going on up there and too many ideas. not enough time to write them all. But I love middle grade. I didn't know how much I would love it until I sort of found this book, and it's where I want to be right now.
We still have a couple more minutes. Anybody want to jump in? All
I was
right.
just going to say, and I don't want to, if that's all that you can say about it, I totally understand, but you had kind of hinted that maybe your next book is going to take the perspective of the other sister. Was that what you were saying?
Mm-hmm. That is
Okay.
what I was saying.
Okay. All right. I didn't know. Maybe everybody else got that, but I was like, is that what she's saying? Or is she
That
not
is what
supposed
I'm
to say
saying.
it? So. Anyway.
Well, it hasn't been announced yet. But yes, I can share that much.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm
That
also
sounds
really
very exciting.
curious. Sorry, I'm really curious to hear what your twins, your own children, thought of your book of Tornado Brain.
Okay.
Like, are they like impressed that they're sort of represented in your book?
Well, I will say, so you sort of soak in all of this stuff in your life and take inspiration from everywhere. But I started writing this book when they were in 3rd grade. So I certainly did not know what they were going to be like as middle schoolers. And Frankie and Tess are definitely fictional. But I, of course, drew from parenting moments, and they know me as a mom. And so now it's when I started writing it, they were like, oh, we want to go to your book signings with you and do all this stuff. And now they're, going to be going into 7th grade, and they think I'm the worst and are so embarrassed and don't want anything to do with me. They say, don't tell anyone that you're an author. We don't tell anyone. Get away from us, Mom.
So they're meeting all their milestones then.
Yes, they certainly are.
The parents.
They certainly are. Yeah.
Love
it. They don't want to tell me anything. They're like, don't put it in a book.
I can tell you as a 7th grade teacher for many years, usually if you ask their teacher or / their librarian, you might find out a lot more. Because they're going to be telling you, oh, she's so wonderful, she's so loyal, she's so this, while you're going, grr.
Yeah, right. Well, you can ask me in a few months when hopefully we're not all trapped in the house together every day. Since I live near Seattle, I've been inside a long time, trapped in this house with those little people.
I read that you've recently fallen in love with Barcelona.
Yes, I have.
Do you see that somehow getting into a book one day? Is that when you're there, do you think about it? When you are missing it, do you think about maybe putting in your next or one of your future books?
I really have no idea. I don't know how things come out when I'm writing, but I just try and live as much life as I can, soak in as much as I can. And then when I'm telling a story, sometimes I'm even surprised by what pops onto the page. Because I don't outline. I am not an outliner. I'm kind of with the other authors here. I would prefer to just write an entire book and then rewrite it several times, because I just can't. That's not me. I'm not like a note card kind of person or organized, plotted out kind of thing. I did that with one book and I hated it, and I will never do it again. And so you never know, maybe something will be set in Barcelona.
All right, we're pretty much out of time. Last chance. Anybody with a question? Okay, so Tornado Brain just came out. Make sure it's on your next list.
Oh, and can I give one more little plug? If, especially for kids who might be neurodivergent and don't necessarily sit with a hard copy book, stock the audiobook, because that can definitely appeal to those types of kids, and they'll love it. And it's a really, really nice recording. I love it. I think they did a fantastic job. Okay.
Well, I was about to ask you if you did the recording, but apparently somebody else did.
No. A professional. Georgina Marie is her name, and she did a fantastic job.
Well, this has been really great getting to know you. Congratulations on your success and your return to writing and your first, go at the middle grade. So we wish you all the best, and everybody make sure you get Tornado Brain in your library. Thank you,
Thank
Kat.
you.
Okay, our final guest has been to Oklahoma, has visited lots of schools. Probably there's people in here who have. We first got to know Kimberly Brubaker Bradley when For Freedom and Jefferson Sons were on the Sequoia a long time ago. And then recently she won the Sequoia with The War That Saved My Life. She didn't just win in Oklahoma for that. She won 14 state lists, and and she was on 45 lists with that book. No big deal, right? Anyway, she's joining us today from Tennessee to talk about her newest book, Fighting Words, and we are so excited to hear about it. Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. Hello.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Do you have the little screen you put up for other people? Okay, stick that up, because then they'll get a good look at the cover. This is Fighting Words is my new book coming out in August. And there it is. It's such a beautiful cover. I love it so much. This is a lot different from the two war books and the books that immediately preceded that, Jefferson Sons and all. It's one of my contemporary novels. I actually have two others, but they're a while back and they're not as well known. Fighting Words is about a 10-year-old girl who lives in foster care, has just gone into foster care with her older sister, Suki. They had been living with their mother's boyfriend for years, and he did something terrible to Della, and that's part of the reason that they're now in foster care. It's one of the first books, I think, to really tackle sexual abuse for a middle school audience, and really a middle grades audience. Della's 10, she's in 4th grade, and we really moved heaven and earth to make this an appropriate book for 4th and 5th graders. You will not find the word sex in the book. You will not find the word abuse in the book. You won't find any words for genitalia. What you will find is 83 uses of the word snow, which is what Della puts in the book when she is covering up the fact that she swears. So this book sounds really heavy when you start going into everything, and it's not. It's and the odd thing about it, even though I in the end I worked as hard as this book as I have on anything else, and I consider it the best thing I've written by far, the book I was put on this earth to write. And but it came out of nowhere. I was in the middle of writing another historical book, and I had sent a draft to my editor, and normally it takes a few weeks to get back, and I sort of chill out, read some things, catch up on other work, so that I can come at the book fresh when I'm at it again. So I was in one of these downtimes, and this was October, 18 months ago. Some things were happening in the world that just, I was so angry. I got so tired of some of the political things we were hearing over and over. And I don't like to discuss the specifics, because then people start discussing the specifics with me, and that doesn't matter. What matters is I sat down in the morning, absolutely incandescent with rage, and started typing. And by the end of the next day, I had 39 pages that was a narrative arc. And it included the first scene and the ending of what ended up in this book, even though we went through then 7.5 drafts, 2 sensitivity readers, and just a gob of work. The first paragraph and the last stayed the same, which has never happened before. And usually I do meticulous I don't do any plotting at all, but I do meticulous research and planning, and I know a lot about my character going in, and I just started writing. I mean, I didn't know their names when I started, and I've never written like that before. It was really fun, and Penguin Young Readers and Dial, and my editor there, who's phenomenal, had my back all the way through what's really I don't want to say groundbreaking book because that sounds important, but I think it is a book that is going to new places for this age. And I think it's important that we do so. So, I mean, this is, when I've been telling friends about it, I've been saying this book is the hill I'm willing to die on. And because I really think that you're not going to get, it just sounds like something no kid is ever going to want to read. I'm going to just read a little bit of the beginning of it to you so you can get a feel for Della, my main character, Della, who I just adore. My new tattoo is covered by a Band-Aid, but halfway through recess, the Band-Aid falls off. I'm hanging my winter coat on the hook in our 4th grade classroom when my teacher, Ms. Devante, walks by and gasps. Della, she says, is that a tattoo? I hold up my wrist to show it to her. It's an ampersand, I say, careful to pronounce the word correctly. I know that, Miss Devante says. Is it real? It's so real it still hurts, and the skin around it is red and puffy. Yes, ma'am, I said. She shakes her head and mutters, I am not one of her favorite students. I may be one of her least favorites. I don't care. I love, love, love my ampersand tattoo. I am 10 years old. I'm going to tell you the whole story. Some parts are hard, so I'll leave those for later. I'll start with the easy stuff. My name is Delicious Nevaeh Roberts. Yeah, I know. With a first name like that, why don't I just go by Nevaeh? I never tell anyone my name is Delicious, but it's down in my school records, and the teachers usually blurt it out on the first day. I've had a lot of first days lately. If I can get it in before the teacher says delicious out loud, I'll say I go by Della. I mean, I'll say that anyhow. I answer to Della, not delicious, thank you. But it's easier if no one ever hears delicious. Once a boy tried to lick me to see if I was delicious. I kicked him in the... Suki says I can't use bad words, not if I want anybody to read my story. Everybody I know uses bad words all the time, just not written down. Anyway, I kicked him right in the zipper of his blue jeans. Let's say it like that. And it was me that got in trouble. It's always the girl that gets in trouble. It's usually me. Suki didn't care. She said, you stick up for yourself, Della. Don't you take crap from nobody. Can I say crap in the story? Anyhow, she didn't say crap. She said something worse. Let me fix that. Suki says, whenever I want to use a bad word, I can say snow or snowflake or snowy. I kicked him right in the stow. Don't you take snow from nobody. Yeah, that works. Okay, so back to me, Delicious Nevaeh Roberts. The Nevaeh is heaven spelled backward, of course. There's always at least one other girl in my class called Nevaeh. It's a real popular name around here. I don't know why. It sounds dumb to me. Heaven backwards? What was my mother thinking? Probably she wasn't. That's just the truth. My mother is incarcerated. Her parental rights have been terminated. That just happened lately. Nobody bothered to before, even though by the time she gets out of prison, I'll be old enough to vote. I can't remember her except one tiny bit like a scene from a movie. Suki says she was no better than a hamster when it came to being a mother, and hamsters sometimes eat their babies. It was always Suki who took care of me, mostly still is. Suki's my sister. She's 16. I'm still on the easy part of the story, if you can believe that. I'm so excited to have this book out, and I'm pleased by the reactions it's getting. And I'd love to answer questions because I do think that, I'd love to know how people are feeling about using this book in their classrooms. Betsy Bird from School Library Journal, who does a blog called Fuse 8, just did kind of a lengthy thing about how she had no intention of reading a book about this topic. She thought it sounded horrible, but she decided to read it anyway. And about how she feels that, well, not every kid will be ready for this book. For some kids, it will be absolutely necessary. And you as teachers and librarians do not know by looking which kids those are. And this is, to some extent, well, this is an Own Voices novel, not all of it, but the important part. And I would say that when I was in school, what people saw was some middle class white kid with two parents that from an intact home, siblings, everything looked fine and everything was not fine. And I really hope that teachers reading this and kids too are going to understand that, everybody feels like the secrets they're hiding are only their own, that no one else experiences what they're going through. And that's really not true. And I think we need to know, there's an awful lot of kids that need to know that they aren't alone, and that there is help. And then also they can learn to stand up for themselves. Fighting Words is about Della finding her voice. So there's sort of the story of why they ended up in foster care, which goes throughout the whole thing and is sort of the big aggression. And then there's sort of the small aggression. There's a boy named Trevor that is teasing her in her class. I'm going to read a little bit of that too, because I think I can. Let me find it. So she's nervous. She's in class. Trevor is in the front row. The teacher, who seems sort of distracted and irritated at having a new student, pushes everybody back except Trevor and slots Della's desk in behind Trevor's, not letting Trevor move out of the front row. And Trevor has also got his name up on the blackboard. He's the only one getting strikes. And Della has new shoes, which she's very happy about. I'm only saying that because of a comment here. Miss Devante found me a pencil. Said she wanted it back at the end of the day. Whatever. I went through the math quiz and wrote some numbers down. I didn't know any of the answers. Couldn't tell you whether I'd been taught any of it before or not. Sometimes stuff teachers say just doesn't stick. Like today, there wasn't room for math inside my head when I felt like the whole class was still staring at me. I had hoped my new shoes would help more. Trevor turned around. Nice shoes, he said. I didn't know if he meant it. Thanks. He said, too bad you're so ugly wearing them. Guess not. Miss Devante said, Trevor, are you talking during the quiz? He said, no, ma'am. The new girl asked me a question. Della, Miss Devante said, please be quiet. If you have a question, raise your hand and ask me. I raised my hand. Miss Devante nodded. I asked, how come I have to sit behind this snowman? The rest of the class exploded with laughter. Miss Devante's face froze. When she got it unfroze, she said, you're not getting off to a very good start, Della. We don't use language like that in my classroom. Sure we did. I just had. So Trevor has with his older brother, they were in the habit of snapping. His older brother snapped girls' bra straps in the 6th grade in their school. And so Trevor thinks this is funny, but when he goes to snap the girls in the 4th grade, some of them are 9 years old, they're not wearing bras. And so what he does is he pinches their back and he calls them babies. And this is something that has gone on, for part of the previous year and continues to go on at recess and just is flying under the radar of everyone. Having your bra strap only being too young to wear a bra thing is something that also happened to me. This is, and when I've been talking about it, I've been asking, I've been taking, I took a poll on Twitter, and of course it's not scientific, but did this ever happen to you in grade school? And did you think it was funny? And did the boys get in trouble? And 53 women answered, and it had happened to 47 of them, and none of the boys have gotten in trouble. 0. I did another panel with 6 other writers last week, and the moderator was a woman also. They were all women, and the only person it had not happened to in grade school was the writer who grew up in Pakistan. So, this is another thing I would like to have, the whole Me Too thing. We're getting tired of this. I would like to have this be something that we can start to talk about it. My friend Barbara D wrote a fabulous book called Maybe He Just Liked You for middle school that is also on sort of harassment at this age. And she said that boys are using it as almost an instruction manual. They didn't know they weren't supposed to do these things. They didn't know it wasn't okay. They didn't realize how uncomfortable they were making the girls they were picking on. So I'm hoping that this is going to be one of these things that starts an awful lot of conversations. And I said, it's very carefully written. I wrote the first thing in this, white heat of rage, and then I put enough scenes together to make a book. And then we started going extremely carefully through it. And I have nephews. I actually have 6 nephews, ages 6 weeks to 10. And the one who's in 4th grade, Charlie, he's who I kept in mind the entire time I was doing the last draft of this, because he's a pretty sheltered, very smart, at the time he was 9 years old, boy. And if he could read it, I felt like I could hand it to almost any kid. And I sent it to my sister-in-law first, who read it, and then gave it to Charlie and said, wow, we had really great conversations about that. So that was cool. And that's what I'm hoping. This isn't, it's not going to be on quite as many state awards, I don't think. But I have to say one thing about the Sequoia Award, because Vicki Jameson, this is totally off topic. Vicki Jameson, who's my good friend, and her book Roller Girl won a Newbery Honor the same year I won for The War That Saved My Life. And we actually had the same editor, which is wild. Had a really good year for that woman. But both of us were on both lists for Oklahoma, the 3rd through 5th grade and the 6th through 8th. And so we were considering it. It was sort of, Newbery Read Part 2. We're going to see who actually wins here, head to head, right? Mm-hmm. I won one grade, she won the other one. So it didn't get us anywhere. So I would really, because I wanted to do, I want to do one more thing, because this is something I love to talk to schools, and I love it more than I love Zooms, as I think almost all writers do. But this is a picture of my daughter and her horse, and I want to put this, or one like it, in the slideshow that I'll show. I took these today, right after she had turned him out, and he was refusing to leave because he adores her. Merlin came to us almost exactly a year ago from a really difficult situation, and we didn't know his whole backstory, but my daughter was just looking for, her horse had died. She was looking for a horse to work with for a few weeks before she went off to a summer program, and it just asked around, and one of the local barn owners said, well, there's a horse for, who lives out in the field on my property. He's for sale. No one will ever buy him. He has terrible manners. Maybe you could teach him something, but whatever, I want him off my property. Actually said, I want that horse off my property. So we went and got him, great big guy, disaster, 45 minutes to get him out of the field because he kept running my daughter over. And he hadn't had his feet trimmed in 8 months because he wouldn't let anybody pick him up. He panicked if he went into a barn. He panicked if you touched his feet. He panicked for no reason at all. He jumped onto the trailer, which surprised the heck out of us, and then he panicked, so we slammed the doors, drove him home, threw him in a field. And then later we heard more and more of his story, and it was horrible. The abuse this animal has, we don't know where he came from, how old he is, or where he was born, what kind of horse he is. We pick up his story when he collapses on a kill truck being hauled to Mexico for slaughter. And because they get fined if they show up with a dead animal, they stopped in Erwin, Tennessee, hauled him off with ropes, and left him in someone's field to die. He didn't die, but the people whose field it were afraid of him, and they didn't touch him for 5 years. At which point he was given to the worst trainer in our area for 30 days professional training, at which point he was sold to the person that we bought him from, who was also afraid of him. So the very first day, my daughter says, I'm going to go out, do some rope work. I said, wear a helmet, be super careful, call me if you need me. Half an hour later, she calls and says, can you please come out here? I said, yeah. And I went out, and she's got him on a rope and a ring, and he is totally relaxed, totally attentive, listening to every word she said. All he ever really wanted was to be able to trust someone. And he's turned into this absolutely fabulous animal. I mean, he's loving, and he's kind, and he's smart, and he's generous, and he cracks us up every single day. And my feeling is that there's an awful lot of kids like Della that end up like this horse with a really bad start, and yet there's still hope for all of them, because I mean, this horse shouldn't let a human being near him, and instead we get, hey mom, where are you going? Hey. So that's my story that's going to go in my school visits when I talk about this book.
We are speaking with best-selling author Kimberly Brubaker Bradley, Newbery Honor winning, Schneider Family Award winning author, tons of other things about her 18th published book, Fighting Words. Now, I have a quick question. You talked about, being safe and careful and making sure that this book was handled properly. At what point did you say that came in? And once you made your decision how to approach it, what did your editor and publisher, how did they come back?
Well, it kind of came in spurts. I mean, the 39 pages was not, it was a narrative arc. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. But my editor called and said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's a novel, I promise. It's just not a novel yet." And so, and she said, "Okay." Believe it or not, what she actually said was, "Okay, we'll buy it," which was awesome. But then it got a lot harder. And when I had what I considered all of the plot pieces in order, which was probably about draft 3 or 4, where I really felt like we knew where all the chunks that we needed. I have a friend who is a PhD psychologist who actually teaches people how to become child therapists. That's what her whole thing is. She works for a college near here. I had her do a professional read and kind of guide me through a few things, and then we pay attention to an awful lot of things. There's a suicide attempt in the book, not by Della, but by her sister. We don't use the phrase suicide. They actually have a whole outline of bullet points of how to responsibly discuss this so that you're not romanticizing it, making it sound like a good idea, or God forbid, giving them instructions. We have therapists in the book, so we needed to make sure the therapy was what a therapist might say to a child in this situation. And so after I was done with it and had it as good as I could do, we sent it off to, I cannot remember her name now, but she lives in New York, and she's an adolescent therapist specializing in teens dealing with these problems, and had her do another run, which resulted in actually changing like 3 or 4 words that are different from the arc to, I don't have a copy of the final yet. This is what I've got as the arc, but the final has maybe 3 words taken out that are just, very tiny differences. The final also has an entirely different author's note and discussion questions, because we felt like for the arc, this was aimed at the teachers and librarians and people reviewing. And in the final copy, which I don't have a copy of what those look like anymore, but those are for the kids. So they're totally different. They're just, they're aimed at the 10-year-olds that might want to know things. One of the things we did take out of the book, it is in the author's notes still, although not in the form I have it here, but it's really hard to know how many kids are affected by sexual abuse because they lie about it and don't talk about it. And the best way you can go about it is actually to ask adults in retrospect anonymously. So the statistics from the United States Department of Justice and the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, are that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually assaulted in this country by age 18. So if you have 25 kids in your class, that's 5 of them. And I don't think most people, and it's 3 girls and 2 boys. I think we tend to see this as a problem that only affects girls. And it really doesn't. It affects girls more than boys, but it's still affecting an awful lot of boys. And for the last several years, because of some things I've written on my blog and some other things, people have told me stories, and the stories come from men and boys also. So we took that statistic, we had it originally in the novel, and we took it out so that we weren't freaking out the 3 out of 4 and 4 out of 5 kids that aren't assaulted, making them sound like there was danger on every corner. But that really is how prevalent it is. And I wish teachers and librarians understood that when they look out at their kids. And there are plenty of other things that kids go through. But it was in Oklahoma that I was talking to a group of kids about War I Finally Won, this one. And, Ada, my main character in the 2 war books, is essentially in a foster care program. I mean, she's an evacuee in World War II, but it becomes essentially a foster mother. And a little girl came up and tugged on my arm after the talk, and I leaned forward. And a lot of times kids do this because they want to say something that they didn't want to announce to the whole class. And she said, "I'm in foster care." And I said, "Are you?" And she said, "Yes." And I just, yes, and just waited. And I said, "Well, that's very hard. So you must be very strong and brave." And she said, "I am. I'm strong and brave," and walked away. That was all she wanted, was that kind of acknowledgement. We don't see a lot of foster care in children's books, and it's, I'm going to forget the statistic now. It's something like, oh, I'm not going to even remember. It was much higher than I thought it was, of the number of kids, and something like 4% of the kids in public schools are in foster care, which again, if you've got 25 in your class, that's one. And another thing that I think is actually really important about Fighting Words, you can tell I actually can kind of get on a soapbox about this, and I'm sorry, but writers as a whole tend to be kind of middle class and write from a middle class perspective. And I get very frustrated sometimes, even though you can see my office behind me, I have a nice life. We treat poverty as though it's much rarer than it is. I cannot come up with I couldn't come up with very many books, and I tried when I was writing this. I asked a bunch of people where the main character or somebody in the book gets food stamps. And it's not a big plot point. It's just that they get food stamps. And 1 out of 3 of our public school kids get food stamps in this country. In the town where I live, there's the Tennessee side and the Virginia side, but there are 3 elementary schools where more than 98% of the kids are qualifying for free lunch. And that's just, I mean, that's their normal. That's not, something that needs to be shown as weird or embarrassing in every single book that we write. This is my dog, by the way. She's on my lap. She's having a hard day. She got shots today. So I would like to see that kind of diversity added to our mix of diversity, where there are poor kids, and the plot of the book is not that they're poor. It's not overcoming poverty. It's just where they are. I think that's more respectful to what most of our not most, but an awful lot of our elementary school kids are doing. And while I get one more moment, I'm going to talk about the incredible importance of librarians getting books into the hands of these kids that don't have access to them. These kids that are, if you're having a hard time paying your rent and electricity, and we're going to get a lot more of that in the next school year, I think, you're not buying books for your kids. And we need to absolutely get them into kids' hands. So whatever you guys do is heroes work.
Thank you, Kim. Well, we have just a couple minutes left. Does anyone like to ask a question or make a comment while we have Kim here?
Sorry, I might have missed it. Is the book out?
No, it comes out in August.
Okay.
August 11th.
Okay. I thought that's what you said. Okay. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I have something. I mean, firstly, I'm so excited to read this book. I love The War That Saved My Life, and actually have the next one out on hold at my library that's closed. So, yeah.
I have 8 books on hold at my library right now.
Yeah. I just heard that there's going to be curbside pickup starting next week for any books you had previously on hold. So I'm pretty excited to get that bunch. But I was just riveted by everything that you were saying, especially about talking about these more, difficult topics in the middle grade realm. I had so many conversations with my editor because of the underage smoking and alcohol abuse. There's a scene where there's an adult who's full on drunk, and so there was so many conversations about take it in, or take it out, keep it in,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And it always, ends up being that it's like, we can't take these things out because they are real realities that tons of kids are living. And like, regular kids, right? And so I really enjoyed your discussion of like making it accessible still, you know, and safe in a way that doesn't take away from the authenticity.
Right.
That was, yeah, I just
Totally.
wanted to thank you for all of the hard work that I know must have taken to write all of that stuff. And then especially your comment at the end about portraying poverty, where that's not like a big part of it, because that's definitely like in my book with Janet, she lives in a trailer. It's not like at the end of the book she doesn't live in a trailer anymore and she's moving up. Like that's just like, you know, her life and and a part of it. And so I just I just loved everything that you said. So I really appreciate and I really appreciate the hard work that you've put into like sensitivity readers and doing the due diligence and all of the research behind talking to people about making sure that this is true and authentic, even if it's a novel. So
Yeah,
mostly just
thank
wanna
you.
say
And
thank
you know, I mean, sometimes you can say things like Rob was talking about, you know, basing it on his cancer, but I imagine, you know, Rob, if it had been 40 years ago, you would have to go back and say, okay, what's the treatment now? Because that was then, and I don't know what they would do now. You're still on mute.
Okay, so I just want to make a last comment before we go, unless somebody else wants to jump in. Okay. Well, you know, again, everyone is so, you know, excited about this book, but, you know, it's kind of a bittersweet type thing. I don't think there's one person in this room who hasn't shed tears over the last several weeks thinking about their students and their kids that are stuck at home in bad situations. I may not be able to finish. Hold on. Okay. So, you know, I think about it all the time, but you're doing something about it and you've put something out there that is going to help somebody. It's going to help lots of people. It's, you know, the people in the comments here have talked about, they already know who they're going to, you know, where that book is going to go, or, you know, they're going to make sure their counselor reads it. So we're very thankful that you have put this out there and have worked so hard to put Fighting Words in print. And so everybody, you need to make sure that you go out and get this book and keep those kids in your thoughts and prayers, and you know, hopefully things will get better. And you know, there's things we can all do. And thank you, Kim, for doing your part.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate everything about what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Kimberly and Kat and Rob and Jess and Polly had to go, but she might be watching some other, you know, somehow else. Y'all, this was so amazing. I want to thank Sheila. I want to thank Penguin Young Readers. I want to thank my brother Kyle. And we're just so thankful for all of you. Thank you for being here today. We only had one this week. We are having two next week. Wednesday will be with Penguin, and Friday will be with another author, but we're not going to, or another publisher. We won't say their name because this is Penguin. So keep a lookout for all that information. Any last words from anyone before we go?
I just wanted to say sorry to Kimberly Rebecca Bradley. I had one job, and that was to put that slide up there when you started. So my brother texted me one job. So anyway, I just thought it was funny.
All right. Well, you guys are awesome. Thank you. We typically hang out here